jotted some notes down on the way up here, and I had discovered that Chevy Traverses are not made with good springs. And so bear with me. I'm going to try to read from my notes. This is going to be interesting. So, okay. Before I dive into this, I do want to thank you and your bride for taking such good care of Peanut. She maintained her health really well, but I know that attending to a senior that's not keeping it all together all the time is a trial. And so I thank you for exalting Christ in your care for your grandma. I watched my own grandmother-in-law pass away in those last days, and watching somebody take their last breath, or you assume the next one is the last one, is hard. And so again, thank you so much for what you all have done. We met the Aikens probably around 15 years ago, and I had the privilege of pastoring them. Well, that's not really probably the right way to say it. I was probably more pastored by them than I was that I pastored them in those 15 years. When they showed up at the church that I was pastoring, I knew two things about them immediately, and that is that they had a passionate love for Jesus Christ, and they loved expositional preaching, which I was happy to agree with them on those things. And so, and reflecting on their lives, I was like, well, let me go just through some things, some memories. It's hard to remember or talk about Nancy without, at least in the 15 years I've known them, without talking about Paul, because they were inseparable. And when you take your vows, and it is until death do you part, that is the only thing that kept them apart, was death. When I was born in 1980, they had already been married for 36 years. There was no separating them. So we remember both of them, Nancy, of course, in particular, for their boundless amounts of energy. This was also coupled with something else that family would remember so well, and that is that they were very sacrificially devoted to family. And I want to bridge a couple of those things. Several years ago, Todd spoke at the Pike County, Missouri Republican Party, and my wife and I walked in, and we were greeted by Toggle and Peanut and handed papers, and they never, whenever they talk to you, they really talk to you, and so it wasn't just a passing hello. They visited with us, and then moved on to the next, whoever was next, and we went and sat down, and they worked their way around the room of hundreds of people. And they were in their upper 80s at that point, and I was exhausted from watching them interact with so many people. We had, just a few years ago, my own wife had a fusion in her neck. We had a physical therapist tell us that she needed to stop homeschooling just for the sake of her own health. And of course, my wife didn't do that, but Nancy found out at 92, 93 years old that that's what the physical therapist told her, and Nancy volunteered to come in and help homeschool our children. And of course, we didn't take her up on that, but I have no doubts that if we had said, we can't do this anymore, she would have been there the next day, books in hand, ready to go. No doubts. We remember them for their love of music. We had, a few years ago, in fact, she had already moved in with you all, and you guys visited our church, and of course the service was over, and folks filed out, but what was left who was left were the Hamiltons and the Aikens. And of course, kids picked up guitars and drums, and we started playing. And what came from that was impromptu worship, which was a blast. But thanks to Nancy, we also had impromptu, I believe she was waltzing on the stage. And Tabby pointed out how cute she looked in her little sweaters and long skirts that she wore every Sunday. Nothing slowed her down. And that was in her mid-90s. We had a drummer at church a few years ago that was convinced that the best way to acclimate an older generation to contemporary music was to play it loudly. And so one of the songs started, and my wife looked over at the Aikens in great concern, and what she saw was, of course, Peanut was holding Toggle's hand, because they always held hands all the way through service. That was just how they did it. And she was smiling, cheek to cheek, just vibrating with excitement, with how loud the music was. And I don't know if it was because she was excited about the music or what, that she could actually hear it. I don't really know, but it was fun to watch. There's so much that we could remember from her life. Her love for Christ, love for scriptures, love for family, church. I want to turn the tables, though, on this and challenge us, not with just what we remember of Nancy, but actually what Nancy remembered. And let me give you a bit of beautiful providence. Back in October of this year, Nancy turned 100 years old. And that same Sunday, I was tasked with preaching from Joshua chapter 4. Joshua 4 is a chapter that is dedicated to the children of Israel remembering the Lord in the crossing of the Jordan. And so in this chapter, verse 5, Joshua says to the 12 men designated to pick up the stones from each tribe, pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. And then he says to the whole of the clans of Israel at the end of the chapter, when your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know Israel passed over the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So these piles of stones were intended solely for remembrance. They were set up because God knew that little children were going to ask their parents someday, what do these stones mean? And so I worked my way through this passage through the week and studying it out. And so Saturday evening comes along, and I'd wrapped everything up, and then my wife says, hey, Amanda sent me a little tribute to Nancy. And it was just a kind of things that Nancy remembered. And I want to read that to you, and some of it's going to be repetitious of what you just said, but it'll circle back, so just hang with me. Nancy Aiken is 100 today, so this was back in October. Nancy was not raised in a Christian home. She told me that some Sundays her parents would send her along with her older brother down the block to the Episcopal Church, presumably for a morning off. She also said that she always liked music and remembers going to choir practice when she was around 6 years old. She learned a little harmony and how to read music by sharing a hymnal with an older woman in the alto section. As a teenager, she went to boarding school in Connecticut, They had a chapel every Sunday, and once a month they would walk into town and go to church. This is where she learned all the old hymns that she still carries with her today. She married and sent her husband off to war in the European front. When he returned 3 years later, he finished up school and they moved to Pittsburgh for a year, then the river town of Alton, Illinois, to work in the family steel mill. In time, they moved to the St. Louis area so that the boys, 3 of them by now, could get a better education. It was here that a neighbor invited them to her church. They decided to go. In time, they met with the pastor. He explained the gospel, and they were saved. By now, in their 40s. She and Paul spent many years getting up to speed through Bible study fellowship. In time, Nancy arranged flowers from her garden to decorate the altar every Sunday. They helped plant a church and helped start a Christian school. Her husband retired from the steel mill and went into seminary. They then pastored at several small churches, hosted numerous Bible studies, tried to help Christians run for public office, and supported pregnancy centers and Christian halfway houses. Nancy is 100 today. She doesn't know what day it is, who we are, or where she is. She continues to forget more and more. But the mind is funny. God made us to love him and glorify him. She sings his praises and wakes up every morning expecting it to be Sunday and looking for a ride to church. And it occurred to me that pairing this, and this is how I closed my sermon, with Joshua 4, when we remember nothing else, is it the Lord that is the only thing we're going to remember? I hope my challenge to us is to be like Nancy when we get to her age. We have been blessed, so thank you for having me. Miss Lily, I think you're next.